right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. All right. Now, we talked about this last night. We're going to talk about it again right now. And I know, you know how I have difficulty staying on script, but I'll do the best I can because I get a little fired up here. But when you consider the extraordinary level of safety that we have in air transportation today, it's tempting to sometimes dismiss or even forget the many factors that went into making that possible. I mean, we're involved in it every single day, we know, so it's easy to forget sometimes, right? The safety net that ALPA pilots and our industry have fought so hard to create, with its many strong and closely knotted lines, protects our passengers, crews, and cargo with a level of safety never seen in the history of aviation. While intertwined, each individual piece of the line is essential to the strength of our industry's safety net. If even one piece becomes frayed or it's cut, we risk developing holes that will cause the entire safety system to unravel. There's a synergy there of the different disparate parts where the whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts. Each is incredibly important. Each of you here today helps make our industry's safety net stronger, and I thank you for that commitment. Please give yourself a round of applause for all the people that do that work. Because if you consider, and you know, like I know, the experienced leaders of our ALPA's Air Safety Organization, the largest non-governmental safety organization in the world, with more than 400 pilot representatives, as well as a professional staff, and our pilot members who are vigilant and voluntarily report safety issues as they fly the line, you understand how ALPA has earned its place as the world's largest non-governmental safety organization. And you know what? It didn't happen by accident. I chose the word accident on purpose. It didn't happen by accident. It was an act of sheer will. We made it happen. And we'll fight to keep it. Now, it all starts with data, right? We all know that. You're all experts. It all starts with data. This year marks the 25th anniversary of the Commercial Aviation Safety Team. Now, you never have a speech, you'll never hear a speech from me without mentioning them, right? I do it all the time. Because it truly embodies the power and the purpose of safety and data collection. Each safety report at an airline is important, each one, because it deepens the pool of available data. The collaboration between government and industry that CAST made possible has improved aviation safety and allowed our industry to reduce the U.S. commercial aviation fatality risk by 83%. In 1997, the Commercial Aviation Safety Team came to existence due to a large number of accidents that happened at the time. You know that with that fatality risk, with the growth that was expected on the charts, that it would have been intolerable. No one would have wanted to fly, right? So something had to be done, and it was. Data and collaboration are the two keys to creating and maintaining the safest air transportation system in the world. And ALPA is very proud to have been engaged from the very start, as CAST has pushed for individual voluntary safety enhancements and transformed how safety works and is conducted. Led by CAST, our industry has evolved from a forensic approach to accident investigation, where you had to wait for an accident to happen and kind of basically try to figure out why it happened in reverse, to a data-driven risk predictive model. Today, in fact, we can fuse data from multiple sources to analyze individual events and reimagine how we can advance safety. Reimagine how we can advance safety. In fact, our union is advocating for additional data sources, such as safety management systems. We all know how important that is, to be included in CAST now. Look, no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. It's a game changer. CAST is among the most significant developments in aviation safety. But there have been other watershed safety events in the U.S. airline industry. And I think you know what they are. Following a series of tragic airline accidents that culminated with Colgan Flight 3407, Buffalo, New York, 2009, Congress passed groundbreaking legislation that set minimum first officer qualification, experience, and training requirements, and prompted the federal regulations that have reduced the airline passenger fatality rate by, ready? Said it last night, 99.8%. So it wasn't the one thing. CAST was an incredible effort, is an incredible effort, but we still had some issues. And then with those 4 accidents, the last one being Colgan in 2009, we said, you know what? We need to take a look at ourselves as well, right? We saw what the performance was. So we knew we needed to address that. We knew we needed additional training. We knew we needed to look at experience and how that contributed, or lack thereof, and how important that was. And what was the result when the two combined happened? That's where you saw with FOQ rules, 2010 FAA Reauthorization Act, Public Law 111-216, my favorite, a precipitous drop in fatality. So you tell me the connection. That's a force multiplier, right? So, but since that passage of the Federal Aviation Administration Extension Act of 2010 and the regulations that resulted, 99.8%. I keep saying it because we took what was once deemed to be not the safest form of transportation in the world based on the statistics, to the most safest form of transportation in the history of humankind, bar none. And when you consider the conveyance, we're putting people in metal composite tubes in the lower stratosphere, that's not too shabby. That's amazing work. We bent reality to our will, and we made that happen. Through collaboration, I might add. Can't do it alone. But yet, the despicable part, despite these life-saving results that are underpinned by data, some in the airline industry are attempting to distort the facts and manipulate the indisputable data about pilot supply. Now, the goal is unmistakable here. Evade, avoid, and even repeal the safety-focused first officer qualification, experience, and training requirements. I just said what the relationship was with CAST, and I said what the relationship was when you combined the FOQ rules. And the result, right? And we know what the result was. So when people start talking about pushing back on safety rules, they get the attention of the Airline Pilots Association. So, for example, one airline, in fact, is trying to exploit a loophole in the law so that reduced pilot qualification and training requirements apply to some of its small community service. Another airline is alleging that its in-house pilot training program is equivalent to U.S. military training. Come on, all right? I think there are a few military pilots in here, right, that would take a different view on that, let's just say, okay? Not to mention, since we are, as military pilots myself, flying on the edge most of the time, I don't think they'd want our accident record anyway, all right? Because it doesn't compete with ours here, all right? So it's ridiculous, in other words. So the airline in question actually proposes that its pilot graduates should be allowed to fly in revenue service with families on those airplanes with half the experience of their peers. Half. I remember where I was on a couple of hundred hours. You know, it takes training to do this job. It takes experience to do this job, constantly, constantly. You know we're the most heavily scrutinized profession in the world. There is no other one that's this scrutinized. Every step of the way, we're going through check rides multiple times, different ways. But half the experience, and this is despite the overwhelming evidence, the overwhelming data that shows that experience and training saves lives. Now, I'm going to make this crystal clear as president of the Airline Pilots Association. ALPA will oppose with the full weight, its full weight, these and any other efforts to evade, undermine, weaken, or repeal first officer qualification, experience, and training requirements. Period, full stop. Please, a round of applause for that. We're not going to let it happen, folks. I know you hear it all the time. Now, I got to wake you up. It was a long night last night. I think by the time we went home, I think I beat the Canadians this time. I stayed longer than the Canadians. I'm sorry, where's my Canadians? Thank you. You're a great team. I got to tell you, I love you all. Look, today's requirements, let me set the record straight. Today's requirements give hundreds of flight credit hours for academic aviation training. In fact, only new pilots, really, only new pilots without 2- or 4-year aviation degrees or military training actually have to meet the maximum flight experience requirements. So I really take exception when people get 1,500 hour, 1,500 hour, well, there was always the ATP 1,500 hour rule. What we did was we actually allowed for less hours if you had 2 or 4 years of college, right? Either 1,000 for 4,000 hours versus 1,500 if you had a 4-year degree, aviation degree. Right, 1,250 if you didn't, 2-year, and 750 for military. We allowed it to go below 1,500, right? But we required the person in the right seat, right, to have the same credentials as the left seat, so that it wasn't a training environment while your families were on board these aircraft, right? Now, we are affirming in every way possible the transformative power of these pilot safety regulations. Now, take a breath, Joe. I hope that you had the opportunity to see yesterday's Washington Post with ALPA's clear message that there's no excuse for airlines to cut safety. And here's a copy of it. And we have a wrapper right here. The pilot shortage is fake. The risk for passengers is real. So every one of those, like in that one instance, one example, in that one particular airline that is seeking to use the loophole in the law, in the regulations. Okay, so how does the community, that local community that they serve, those small communities, feel about that reduction in the level of safety? Because that's real. This is all data-driven stuff. We're not just saying it. It's real. Now, to be clear, sounded a little tough there, but have to be. Our union stands ready to work with any industry stakeholder on constructive ways to ensure we have a robust and diverse pipeline. And no one is more invested than the Airline Pilots Association in that. However, we will give no ground when it comes to the hard-fought gains that we have made in safety. Again, dot period. Rather, our industry should be focused on working together to break down the cost and cultural barriers that stand in the way of far too many aspiring aviators achieving their dreams. And Polly, I thank the Secretary for many of the positive things he said. He has, Secretary Buttigieg, I don't know if you watched him recently, whenever he's getting asked questions about what's going on in the airline industry, he's putting the pressure right where it belongs on how those airlines are managing their people and what it takes to actually make a real, true profession through the lens of the dignity of work. That's what he represents, and I support him fully. So, now, I am really pleased to report that, once again, newly released FAA data shows that the United States is, in fact, breaking pilot production records, breaking them, and now created more than 9,000 certified aviators over the past year, 9,000. And we are on track to produce 10,000 this year, right now, 10,000. A record, that's a record for pilot production. And did you notice that with the new contracts in our regional pilots area, the toughest, the entry point, which has typically been the toughest, And, we've stood opposed to some of the efforts that RAA has tried to put into place. Over 100% in Piedmont change in the number of applications. Now, where's the shortage? There they were. There they were. You treated people with respect. You actually really treated them as if it was a profession that entrusts the lives for people who have the regulatory responsibility and the professional duty to get people and families safely from departure to destination. Overnight, the applications rolled in. There's not a shortage of pilots, there's a shortage of good management out there. I'm sorry. So, as we gather here to rededicate ourselves to the cause of aviation safety, I know I could tell you right now, I'm going to tell you right now, here's how it works in Washington, D.C. There's a meeting across town of airline executives and aviation special interests who want to conveniently ignore this extraordinary pilot production activity and instead try to go the shortcut route and skirt the safety rules each of you in this room fought so hard to achieve. That's the bottom line. It is all about dollars. It is not. Safety talk is cheap, right? I don't know about you, but if I was going to surgery, I don't want the new guy. I want somebody with experience and training. That's what I want. And that's one person's life at stake, not an airplane full of people. So turning back the clock just isn't going to happen. We're not going there. I'll park airplanes before I did that. I'm serious. Advancing our life-saving work is what we do here. We know we're data-driven. We know this is true. Shortcuts, workarounds, they simply won't fly. They're not going to fly. Now, when it comes to protecting, don't get nervous, lawyers. I'm okay. Don't get nervous. When it comes to protecting the traveling public, and frontline workers whose labor drives air transportation, that's a higher cause. Don't come to me with these harebrained schemes to put a low-time, inexperienced pilot in the right seat of an airplane without the data. And it's the whole reason we got here, because of a series of accidents that happened, right? These literally, I mean, you've heard it. It's written in blood. These regulations were written in blood. And I'll tell you something about labor, and that's one of the things that's remarkable about this administration in Washington right now, right, the White House. I don't know if you ever heard Marty Walsh speak. I've been trying to get Marty from time to time. He will fire you up. He is a labor person. And I want to tell you something. You look at what's going on at Amazon. You look at what's going on at Starbucks. The gig economy stuff, Uber. Labor is ascendant right now. Workers are awake. They know how important it is to have a voice in their future. When people first meet you, what do they say? They don't say, where did you go on vacation? What kind of art do you like? Or anything like that. They say, what do you do? Because what you do is essential to you as a human being. Philosophers have written about it for eons, right? It just is. It's tied to your self-esteem, your place in society, your contributions that you make, the dignity that you have. That's what labor's all about. That's why we're a union, right? That's what formed our union. Half of the founders of our union died, right? So, look, as I mentioned, every single line in our industry safety net must be kept strong, or the integrity will be weakened. We can't allow that to ever happen. We're not going to go backwards. We're going to go forwards together. Collaborate. We collaborate all the time. The only reason all this could have happened, actually, all these rules that were put into place, the same people who were pushing back on it were people that helped make it. They had to do something with the accidents, so they came together, we worked. Now, for this reason, ALPA works and will continue to work in tremendous manner in a variety of different critical areas, including using a clear safety case to oppose efforts by some to allow reduced crew, single pilot, or even remotely piloted operations in commercial airline operations. Now, look, I hear this from you all the time about the concern about single pilot ops. And I hear people say, well, if we have a cruise pilot, we could put one in the back and he'll get some rest, and then when he comes back, he's going to be more refreshed. Try getting a pair of wings and telling a pilot that, okay? Because once you haven't accounted for the fact you just removed one of the biggest safety features in the aircraft out of the cockpit. We say, what? You applauded this 100 times last night. A minimum of 2 fully qualified, adequately rested, trained, and qualified pilots on the flight deck. That's what made the difference, right? I'm not saying we avoid automation. I'm not saying we automation. But we have to be, and I'll read it a little bit later from Sully, we got to be masters of our machines. We have to understand what the automation's doing. In fact, you need more training, not less. Before, we used to have the federated systems, right? You know, you had various different instrumentations. You could get an indication here. You could say, well, let me cross-check and look at this. You know, go for secondary, see if there's any other indications to indicate that that is actually a real warning. And now, though, with these integrated systems, right, all that's being done through computerization. It's handy, right? I mean, it helps us make decisions. However, if you don't know how it works, I can give you examples right now, and I think you know them, right, of where the automation led people astray because they didn't understand the automation, right? You have to understand what it's doing. So, look, here's another thing. I created, in another area here, because I talked about my Canadian brothers and sisters here, but also here in the U.S. with our Alaska pilots, but I created ALPA's President's Committee for Reduced Crew Operations as a central point for the issue within our union, all right? I felt it was that important. That is the big alligator by the boat right now, this reduced crew ops. So it doesn't matter, U.S., Canadian, doesn't matter, all right? The committee conducts its work based on the principle that 2 well-trained pilots on the flight deck at all times is an essential factor in the safety net that protects the entire air transportation system, all right? So we'll keep an eye on that. Now, mentioned U.S. and Canada. Remote operations. You know that some of the airports we go into, some of the places to travel, are pretty rugged. You know, you fly up in the north during wintertime. I got a glimpse of that every now and then. It's pretty challenging flying. It really is. So Peter Black, Captain Peter Black, first there, has done a remarkable job with our Remote Operations Committee, and he's working to enhance safety standards at diversion and emergency airports in remote locations. Really important work. If you've ever had to experience that, going into a challenging airport and or having to divert into one. ALPA is making every effort to ensure that remote airports are adequately prepared to meet the needs of passengers and crew, regardless of the size of the aircraft or the weather conditions at the diversion airport. Now, security here for a moment. Talk about security. Where's Wolfgang Koch? There's my chairman out there, security. I see him. All right. As greater numbers of flyers take to the skies these days, ALPA is also pressing to improve flight deck security in the context of the more than 1,800 unruly passenger incidents that we've seen so far this year that the FAA has documented. You know, there seems to be a lack of civility. I think by the time everybody gets through security at the airport, you know, gets the shakedown, sometimes they're not in the greatest moods. Plus, a lot of people have acted out. You know, I think there's a lot of people who have tried to divide our nation in various ways. And you know what? That's the wonderful thing about labor. We bring it together. We actually bridge the gap. We represent everybody. We represent everybody because we have a common interest, right? And it's called the dignity of work. That's important to people. It really is. That's the bridge builder. What you're putting, you know, can you provide for your family? Can you have a future? You know, can you have a retirement plan? I mean, those are essential subjects, right? Some try to divert us and divert our attention and lead us down rabbit holes, you know, getting spun up on this issue or that issue. But that's fundamental. That's why unions are ascendant. People are realizing that again now, right? Now, with the FAA's announcement in July of a proposed rule requiring secondary flight deck barriers on newly manufactured airliners, we were gratified that finally the government had acted on the issue after years of delay. It was 2018 in that reauthorization that secondary barriers were mandated to be put in all newly manufactured aircraft. All right? Well, again, across town, the special interests really slowed the process down. Now, I was part of that process. I've been, doing this work for 10 years, and up here at the national level, much more the local level. But we've been working on this a really long time. And the reason it got slowed down, even after they put it into law, is I just remember the first meeting after somebody decided it was time to sit down and discuss how we were going to do this, which we had already done through the RTCA. And I just remember the first question was, well, what do we mean by secondary barriers? I thought I was going to die. I thought I was going to go through the roof. Are you serious? After RTCA's work in terms of the minimum operational performance standards that were developed at airplanes, actually in United, 787, right, Bob? 787 had a secondary barrier. But why'd they do that? Why'd they push back? Well, during all that time, guess what? How many airplanes off the line, Bob? 1,200, 2,000, somewhere like that? About almost 2,000 aircraft came off the manufacturing lines without secondary barriers that would have had them had they acted in accordance with what Congress wanted, which was to put secondary barriers in airplanes. Pretty simple. The standards were already there. So not to be outdone, we're born yesterday here, we're going to continue to urge lawmakers to pass legislation to require existing fleets to be retrofitted with secondary barriers. I'm telling you, when somebody wants to do something bad in an airplane, that reactionary gap is the meaning between life and death. When that door opens and tests were done, studies were done, I don't want to bore you with them, but it was pretty clear that all you had to do was wait for that door to open, that cockpit door to open. And they did some tests, and you could, wouldn't be that hard. But a secondary barrier creates that momentary gap with enough time to get that door closed and secured. So we're equally committed to calling on Congress to pass legislation requiring primary flight deck barriers on all cargo aircraft already. Because, look, cargo carriers carry all sorts of things, all right? I'm a FedEx person. And, sometimes we have animal handlers on board the aircraft, right? And they carry, pitchforks, shovels, sedatives to put the animal down if they need to. And I have to tell you that, normally with a hardened cockpit door, they would normally lock the door, and they would give the sedatives to the flight crew, and they kept them locked up. But now they're making aircraft without these hardened cockpit doors, just sitting right in the cockpit. We don't know who they are. They're not vetted the way we're vetted. I don't even know if they get the equivalent of a credit check, but it's not the same. And we don't know even what the definition of an animal handler is. Is it a person who drove the truck, or is it actually a really trained person? So, just a lot of unknowns. It's not what we do in aviation to keep it safe. So as part of enhancing flight deck security, ALPA is also pressing to strengthen the federal flight deck officer program, okay? Because we have federal flight deck officers on some of these aircraft without hardened cockpit doors. And, when you have a weapon at your side and an unknown person right there, not too great a situation since you're busy flying an airplane. Thanks in part to our union, the House Homeland Security Appropriations Bill increased FFDO funding by approximately $4.5 million to restart training and establish a full-time Atlanta, Georgia recurrent training facility, because right now, with the level of funding, there's a big backlog of pilots who want to go through the training and want to become federal flight deck officers and can't, because they just can't get through. Now, this bill also contains very strong language that requires the Transportation Security Administration to justify to Congress its proposed budget against actual financial needs of the program. Now, I don't know about you, but when I hear that, right, that to justify to Congress a proposed budget, isn't that what you're supposed to do in a budget anyway? I mean, it just seems like common sense. That's what I have to do with this budget. I have to kind of justify what it is I want. I have to try to allocate the resources accordingly to do it, if I have them, which we do. So I don't know. The congressional spending process is still underway, so we're going to keep an eye on it. That 4.5 is not in the bag right now, so we're going to have to keep working on that. So, but in the coming months, we'll be working to ensure that the final appropriations package that's signed into law includes increasing more appropriate funding to allow the FFDO program to fulfill its critical aviation security meeting. Now, one more thing about FFDOs, just got to tell you, I think you heard it last night. You know, it's the largest federal law enforcement agency group of pilots. That's how many pilots are FFDOs. And you know, it really costs very little for the government. They do it pretty much for free, the pilots. But if you were to afford, you know, what an average salary might be for somebody with that kind of responsibility, you know, pick $50,000 or $60,000 a year, whatever you want to pick. We figured it came out to be anywhere from 800 million, sorry, to $1 billion in terms of value to the flying public, in terms of security. That's a pretty big number. And now jump seating, right? The important role of jump seating pilots is another security and safety asset on the flight deck. And it's just one of the many reasons that we're working to champion the goals of the Aviation Jump Seat Group. Aviation deals with safety. It deals with security by having another set of eyes in the cockpit. It trains set of eyes. It aids in security, right, by having to obviously vet the individuals that go into the cockpit and ensure that they are who they say they are. And then they are the folks who uphold pilot and command authority, okay, which makes us the final arbitrators. That's the foundation of why we call ourselves the final arbiters of safety, is that pilot and command authority. And while many try to sometimes challenge that, you know, it's just not going to work, right? Because we are ultimately responsible. We have the regulatory responsibility and professional duty, like I said, to get people safely to destination. So our efforts do include, though, and I told you that this has just been a game changer. We have, on our ALPA app, we have now a jump seat finder capability where a pilot who's trying to either get to work or go back home can come on to the app, put its, you know, where he or she wants to go, and every available choice will come up. And they could select one, do the reservation. It'll even send alerts when the flight's delayed. It's probably better than most passengers have, really. And it's been a real game changer because you know what? Now our pilots are coming to this app. And we paid tribute to some of the award winners last night that helped make this, right? And we have our line pilots' attention. We could communicate directly with each one of them, individually, or a group, or an MEC. It's unlimited, the potential in terms of keeping them informed about what's going on in our country, on the Hill, in safety, security, pilot assistant jump seats. We can ask them questions. We can get data. This is the future right here. And since we've done it, which has been only a very short time, more than 1.8 million searches since the program was launched. That's incredible. That's a lot. It's the first time you clapped involuntarily. So it just goes to show you how much value there is there. Because if anybody's jump seated, had the experience of jump seating, post 9/11, post-COVID, you know it's not fun. The pilot who is going to fly the aircraft, who is going to give the aircraft, you mean I can't keep my mustache clipper? Okay. But you're going to give me the airplane. Okay, I get it. I'll play. I'm going to go along with this. But what I'm saying is that, you know, our pilots suffer these, you know, indignities, these myriad of indignities, just trying to get to work. You know? Yes, I understand the security part about it. I know it has to be layered. We're going to do that. But could you be a little bit more, you know, not understanding, but, you know, you're going to give us the airplane. So anyway, and this really, so if you can help somebody get home a day earlier, you got a friend. And if you can get somebody to work, right, you got a friend. So 5G, let's talk about that for a second. And I won't even talk about the new thing coming down. Well, it's not new. We've been fighting for this. But GPS, stand by. It's very similar to this, about GPS interference through legato. But anyway, ALPA's immediately raised concern about 5G. We've been doing this for years. I remember writing a letter years ago. Because of the FCC and how they auctioned off part of the radio spectrum to the 5G mobile wireless industry. Now, why they did that? Well, because of the potential interference from 5G signals, right? If you understand how that works, RF signaling, you know, there's a chance for bleed over. And in cases, we have seen it through RTC testing. In the frequency, you know, the frequency band is very close to the frequency band on how our radio altimeters. So if you're ever going to mess with a piece of equipment that is absolutely safety critical, a radio altimeter that tells you how high you are above the earth. Now, I mean sea level, the earth, right, as you're coming in for a landing. I mean, you really want to get the wrong signal there, either showing that you're A, too close, or not telling you at all that you are close to terrain. I mean, how that happened, you know, we're still trying to unearth that and work back. But it's more important about what we do now, right? And so the industry is trying to work together, right, with the FCC and FAA and try to get this all squared away. And ALPA has been part of that coalition from the beginning. And the wireless industry, to their credit, has agreed to voluntarily limit power levels with the understanding that airlines will complete the necessary upgrades on radio altimeters by next summer. Remember, from the company standpoint, too, they'd like to make one adjustment, one retrofit, not multiple retrofits. So we have to be sure that we give them good information about what we're going to need. But in terms of getting those new radio altimeters manufactured, it's going to take some time. It's just going to take some time. And in the meantime, we're going to talk about Next Gen. So I'm on the Next Gen Advisory Committee, and here we are working, right, to create a much more efficient space-based system of navigation. And now all that work we did on all those really sophisticated, highly precise approaches and arrivals, we can't use them if it's 5G, if we have an interference issue. We can't do these very precise approaches at times in some of those areas if you have a certain piece of equipment that doesn't meet, you know, the requirement. So all those billions of dollars we're spending on Next Gen, we're kind of in a holding pattern in a lot of ways. Because the biggest problem with Next Gen right now is equipage. Not every aircraft can do what we're asking it to do. Some airplanes are better equipped than others. So there really does need to be, I think, not exactly in terms of manufacturer, but there needs to be a limit, a requirement for a minimum equipage level. Otherwise, we're putting a very heavy load on air traffic control to route aircraft that are equipped to an ILS, and all the other ones that are equipped well can shoot, you know, RNAV, RMP flights, right? Approaches, rather. So, you know, I don't know if Terry McVenis is in the room here. He's president of RTCA, former ALPA pilot. You know, at Aero Club, I mentioned that, because I'm going to talk about commercial space here in a little bit. But, you know, we have, so I'm on the Next Gen committee, right? That's about aviation. That's about commercial aviation. I'm on the Advanced Aviation Advisory Committee. I can never say that for some. AAAC used to be the drone committee, right? But now taking into account all the new types of advanced air mobility that's out there. And then we have the commercial space, the ComStat committee, right? All vying for use of the airspace. And because every time there's a commercial launch, they block off a big piece of airspace, right? And a blunt piece of airspace, very crudely done. And yet we have some technological capabilities right now where we could more dynamically manage the airspace. But I advocated that perhaps since this, you know, we have enough problems right now with the scheduling on airlines, when you throw in commercial space launches, that there should be an overarching shared mental model that pilots would call it, right? Where we take all the work of those committees and coordinate those efforts since we have limited resources. Of course, Terry picked right up on it and actually came up with a suggested model to where we could integrate the efforts together, right? I mean, because if you did a lot of work in one area and found out it had a negative effect on another area, that doesn't really help you very much. In fact, you just spent resources. So we're involving and ensuring the safety of the national airspace and how we share it. And we're also involved in airport safety, right? In U.S. and Canadian airports at the local, regional, and national level. Our 150 airport safety liaisons continue to serve as our union's local representatives. Their relationships with airport management and air traffic controllers allow ALPA to advance safety and ensure our perspective from the flight deck. So, same with runways. We continue to advocate to improve runway safety through overrun technologies. I'm not sure if you're all familiar, but including engineered material arresting systems that the aircraft goes off the end of the runway, it could slow it down safely. Additional runway safety lights, expanded safety systems. In fact, in one example, ALPA has been working with the Greater Toronto Airports Authority to develop taxiway markings and signage that will help reduce runway incursions. Now, at the same time, ALPA's Cargo Committee, all right, very intimately involved in that, now a standing committee here in the Airline Pilots Association continues to work to achieve one level of safety and security across all of its operations, because there isn't one level of safety or security in cargo, including fatigue rules. So through our participation in a number of U.S., Canadian, and international policy advisory groups, we're advancing our pilots' perspective on issues ranging from research on Class E and Class C cargo compartment fire suppression limitations and requiring aircraft rescue and firefighting at airports during our all-cargo operation. Because sometimes when cargo goes to these airports, the rescue firefighting is not up to snuff, basically. So we're also on the DG side. We're working to improve dangerous goods regulations, including lithium battery cargo packing provisions and the lack of state of charge limits on lithium-ion batteries that are contained in equipment, because some of these lithium batteries are in equipment when they are shipped, and in battery-powered vehicles as well. Now, ALPA has achieved important progress in the completion of standards that address the threat from fire in a cargo compartment spreading to one containing packages of lithium batteries. At ALPA's urging, the USPS, the U.S. Postal Service, amended its regulations recently in August of 2021 to allow air carriers, for the first time, to screen U.S. mail for undeclared hazardous goods. Now, in a reflection of our commitment to a data-driven approach to safety, ALPA has also participated in accident investigations, including issues such as engine and generator failures, gear collapses, runway excursions, the list goes on. You know, we operate our own accident investigation team, and they work side by side with the NTSB. Now, in that area of commercial space that I mentioned earlier, we support the National Transportation Safety Board in receiving legislative authority for investigating commercial spaceflight accidents in the national airspace system. Their structure is basically plug and play, it fits perfectly. And recently, I just read yesterday in Politico about the FAA's MOU acknowledging that they should be involved in accident investigations when it comes to commercial space. So, you know, also now, this is really big with the administration and with us because we're good global citizens. ALPA is also backing requirements for next-generation fuels to meet core aviation safety standards and clean air. The Inflation Reduction Act, which was passed into law in August, contains key provisions to increase the price parity of sustainable aviation fuels with traditional fossil fuels, a measure for which ALPA advocated. Now, among the many safety tools available to ALPA members are our union's pilot assistance programs. We paid tribute to some of them last night. The suite of programs we offer is rooted in science, informed by data, and carried out through industry-wide collaboration. At every level, our union helps our pilots to ensure that they're mentally and physically prepared to perform their job. I said, judge an organization by the way it comes to its members in need, and the PA folks do that in spades. So, throughout ALPA's history, some pilot groups created pilot peer support programs, while others, the smaller groups, didn't really have the resources to do that. But today, ALPA's pilot peer support program ensures that all ALPA members have 24/7 access to a growing cadre of trained pilot peers to confidentially discuss personal or professional concerns. Now, in the past year, we've trained hundreds of pilot peer support volunteers across the ALPA system, and integrated the program into the ALPA pilot assistance and structure in Canada as well. They had their own, but they've adapted now, kind of shifted over to it and adapted to the system. And this week, we're proud to host the first ever pilot peer symposium that obviously is going on here during the Air Safety Forum. Now, my big issue. As ALPA president, I believe that it's not only possible but imperative that our industry create a robust, diverse, and inclusive pilot workforce in the future while making certain that we continue to lead and never let up on a commitment to safety. Tomorrow, I'll be honored to welcome Dieudonné Kazembe, who was born in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and came to the United States as an unaccompanied refugee minor with a dream, the dream of becoming a pilot. Dieudonné will tell us his story of how that dream is becoming fulfilled. You're going to really enjoy that. He's a really good speaker, too. Now, truly, our industry safety net is the result of perseverance through strength. That is the theme of this Air Safety Forum. And it's all about perseverance through strength and unity. As members of the world's largest non-governmental aviation safety organization, ALPA pilots understand that every individual piece of the line in that net is essential. That piece of line may be life-saving first officer qualification, experience, and training requirements. It may be the pilot peer support program, or it may be reducing the threat of a fire in one cargo compartment, spreading to another that's containing lithium batteries. The data shows that every single line in our industry safety net plays a part in making North American air transportation system the safest in the world. And I'm proud to say that ALPA pilots have worked for more than 90 years to help design, build, and strengthen that industry safety net. And for the sake of the passengers and shippers who we are immensely proud to serve, ALPA pilots will always fight fiercely to protect every piece of that safety net. Thank you for listening this morning. I appreciate it. Thank you.